We're live. The mic works. How exciting. Hello everyone, welcome to Arch and Towers.
Is that the new mic?
That is the new mic. We probably sound better than ever.
Wow.
I hope you can hear us. Welcome to Arch and Towers. Myself, Paddy, Davitt here, fresh from Colney, ahead of the Aston Villa game. Norwich heading there to Birmingham tomorrow. I would probably say, Pad, we had a more routine Colney than we've had the last few weeks.
In what respect, mate?
Well, we didn't have the Nelson didn't even get a mention.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
We had no
That's true.
dramatic speeches.
No.
We had no major sound bites, and the most hilarious bit probably revolved around Chroma. But we did have a couple of little bits of news, and I guess we'd touch on a little bit of injury news first, shall we? Because that was the big news. Jamal Lewis, 4 months out after a small knee op. That's a major issue, because he looked pretty good in pre-season.
Terrible news for the lad. Yeah, I mean, let's be brutally honest. I mean, with Husband in now and Steeperman and Toffolo, he probably would have been down the pecking order, but that's probably immaterial because he had done enough to be almost bridge that gap in record time, really, from no longer perceived as a development player to an actual first team squad player. So, and that was purely on his body of work in pre-season, where not only Farker, but I remember Naismith last Friday saying that he'd been the pick of the younger players through pre-season. So for him to, I remember Farker now saying that it was after Charlton, and instead of having a couple of days rest, he'd actually gone back in and did more sort of work on his own, and maybe that load had ultimately triggered the problem where he's now out for 4 months. So it's a massive learning curve for the lad. I'm not saying it was completely related to deciding to do some extra sessions on his own, but in the sense that he's obviously desperate to impress and had done, and 4 months is, you know, a fair chunk of the season. So wish him well with his rehab, and you know, if it all went to plan, then you'd like to think he's back in and around it sort of towards the end of the season. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I guess 4 months, it's New Year time, isn't it? If all went well, and hopefully the operation wasn't a big one, but of course there's a fair amount of time. You have to be careful with knees, and it's probably a big shame because he obviously did so well in pre-season, yet we still haven't got to see him actually play in the first team battles, which is a big shame for Jamal. What we also had before Colney, I suppose we should touch on, is a signing. Sean Raggett joining from Lincoln, 3-year contract, loaned back immediately to Lincoln until January, when I think they'll get to have a proper look at him. Not the end of the business as well, by the sounds of Daniel Farker. They are still awake.
They are still awake, yeah.
To business.
And I would suggest centre-back is one area they're still looking to do business. So, I don't think that's Norwich's window done by any stretch.
Okay. And in terms of Sean coming in, there's this physicality, isn't there, about him, which Farker seems to like. And I guess they just want to see how he gets on back at Lincoln, don't they?
Yeah.
They're in League Two, aren't they, this season?
They are, yeah, just gone up, yeah. I mean, the more revealing quotes from the confirmation both sides of the Norwich and Lincoln end, I think were from Danny Cowley. This is a guy who 12 months ago was a part-time player. So let's not accelerate him unduly. I mean, he's made some amazing strides in that 12-month period to now be not only a full-time player, but having the likes of Norwich, reportedly West Ham, Sunderland looking at him. So he's obviously a late developer because he's only 24. I've not really looked into his backstory and why, you know, he had to drop out the pro game, as it were. But it shows his character is there, a bit like Marley Watkins in that parallel. You know, a guy who wasn't quite good enough and had to come back the hard way. So again, another one who fits the template in terms of the type of character they want. And physically, yeah, certainly 6'5", imposing figure in the Zimmerman mould, I would imagine. So you can see why they've done it, but I think he's at this stage quite some distance from being a championship performer for Norwich. So it's definitely in the future category for me, that one. But if he kicks on again in League Two in the next few months, then who knows? I didn't get the sense it's cut and dried that in January he will be back here. It's January Norwich will have a look at him, and if they feel that he's now at a level in his football development where he could actually positively impact on Norwich's championship season over the second half, then he'll be back. If not, I could conceivably see him remaining at Lincoln for the rest of the season. But as I say, one for the future, but let's not get too carried away and think he's Franz Beckenbauer / John Terry.
John Terry, hey? More on him in a bit, I'm sure. Get your questions in, let us know where you're watching from. It's always good to know. We'll probably be another 10 minutes or so. You did mention Christoph Zimmerman, Pad. We got to speak to him. He was the man fresh from all those selfies after Wednesday's game, which a couple of nice lines. out of that. And there's I mean, he's a good guy. He's clearly made a big impact. The thing is, to me, there's like a freshness about him, isn't it? The way he seems to be, the cultural differences, I suppose, from playing in Germany. The fact that he was playing with a side that had 3,000 fans watching, and you almost imagine some of those guys in non-league football now, if they stepped straight into a top-level side, this is kind of how they would deal with it. There's that freshness, and he's done well on the pitch. That's the thing for me as well. You'd have to say he was probably as good as any of the defenders on Wednesday, and given the jump he's made personally, he's really made a good fist of it. Yeah,
I mean, having said that about Raggett, I mean, you could contest that Zimmerman had to make the same sort of jump in a relatively abbreviated time frame, and the additional, which he alluded to himself today, sort of acclimatisation period from German to English football. I thought that was quite telling, given how him and Franke didn't exactly cover themselves in glory against Messrs Graben and Vaughan. That was almost a massive eye-opener for him in terms of the physicality, some of the challenges aerially. He talked about headers and elbows and anything goes. And you could see, even from Sunderland to QPR, where they faced similar operators in a Mackie and a Washington, they were far more aggressive in their one-to-one defending. So if they've realised what it's all about now, then I think there's no doubt. Physically, you look at the two of them, and they are imposing figures. If they can have that aggression to their game, they're clearly decent on the floor as well. Franke more so maybe than Zimmerman. I think we saw enough against QPR that they could get a grip of what the Championship's all about, and more often than not, certainly at least match opposing strikers, because Sunderland was a very worrying scenario that if they were going to get bullied to that degree and concede goals in that fashion, you feared. But give them their due, give him his due. They responded where it matters most on the pitch, and we'll see what Saturday Villa Park brings. We'll touch on Villa Park now, shall we? Just before that, we'll answer some questions. George Woods, hello George, he says, question mark, Snodgrass rumour. There is no way Robert Snodgrass is going to end up back at this club. I don't even know what the rumour is, but I assume it's to do with football. We won't get involved in that. Oliver Savoury, any right backs being linked can't continue with only Ivo Pinto, which brings up Ivo Pinto's injury from midweek, which actually doesn't sound as bad as I probably feared at the time. It was cramp. Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically what it was in a nutshell. That here's a guy who pretty much missed all of pre-season. If you think about it, he got injured, did his hamstring against Cove in the first friendly, and then we didn't see him until Swindon, wasn't it? So that whole block, massively key core block of fitness work, he's missed out on. And you saw, as Farke alluded to again today, 60 minutes in, almost the tank had been emptied, and of course when you're fatigued, that's when you're going to get cramp and muscle injuries. So I think swift action was timely. He knew straight away. He signalled to the bench straight away after he'd gone for a burst down the right hand side. Came straight off, and he's scheduled to train. We've left them now just as they're about to undergo training this afternoon. So he's going to play a full part in that. But I think the caveat from Farke was pretty clear today that 2 games in 3 days, given his limited amount of fitness work, is going to be too much. So he won't start the game, but hopefully fit enough to be involved in the squad, maybe on the bench. Maybe on the bench, indeed. I mean, just on that point, though, Russell Martin, I can now conceivably see if... Don't forget, Tim Close is back in the mix from next week. You've got Franke, you've got Zimmerman, Raggett, okay, maybe second part of the season. And also, if they get another centre-back in between now and the end of the window, Russell Martin, is he now, whether he wants to be or not, perceived as a right-back in this squad and right-back option for Pinto, because I think he's going to struggle to get in at centre-back. Especially as there aren't many right-back options. It'll be interesting to see who plays tomorrow. I guess, obviously, Yannick Wildschut is still around as a possible right wing back option. Richie Temple points out Closer could go out in January as Raggett will come in, and I guess that's the option of selling Tim Closer. But he's quite happy here now, Tim. And we'll see what happens when he's fit and back playing. Lee Thompson, a striker, would be good for the next signing. Any thoughts? I mean, we've asked them that a couple of times, haven't we? There doesn't seem any urgency to bring in a striker. No. So, again, unless it's the trigger for something else happening at the top end of the pitch, as in outs. No, I don't see them bringing anybody in at the top end. Marley Watkins is the man. Indeed. Asking as well the guys who starts on Saturday. I mean, it's hard to look beyond Nelson given what happened on midweek, would you say? Yeah, well, it is. But again, he pretty much confirmed that there would be changes. Clearly, Pinto will probably be one. I think Steeperman, I think he's going to start. It's where he plays, whether you play him instead of Husband or in front of Husband. I could conceivably see Naismith getting a recall. He's very big, clearly, at the minute, in this pretty much recovery play period, games every 2 or 3 days. He doesn't want to overload where possible. And so, because obviously the counter-argument is they've come off the back there 2-0, really accomplished display in many respects. When they weren't at their smooth passing best, why not reward those lads, say same again? But I think the reality is with this guy, it's almost not, the result isn't immaterial, but he looks at it more in a holistic approach, as in they've got Charlton midweek, then they've got Millwall the following week, and he needs to rotate. So, excuse me, I think it would be harsh if Oliveira missed out, but I wouldn't rule it out, put it that way.
Well, which is, yeah, it's going to be very interesting what he picks, and also the formation he plays, I guess, as well. He did say a lot of positive things about Marco Stiepermann, didn't he? I think, what do you call it, unbelievable physical condition. And what was the stat about him?
The running man, in a 9-minute cameo, he ran 1.4 kilometres. If you extrapolated that over the other 81 minutes, that would be a championship record. The man has a stat up his sleeve for every conceivable scenario. So, if that is now clearly he was quite keen to impress. I think it's probably unrealistic to think he would run as much for the remaining 80 minutes. But I mean, we said it when he came on. He is in a big unit.
He's tall.
He's a big unit, and there will be certain cases where Villa falls into that category where Norwich are under pressure, and to have him in your box, I think that's quite a useful asset.
I mean, they're aware, aren't they, of Villa's situation, Norwich, and they'll obviously focus on themselves. But it's a curious one, isn't it? They've had such a hard start, and with how that club is set up, you can't really see them being particularly patient with Steve Bruce if it's not working.
No, definitely not. And just before we came online here, I think they've got a few injuries as well. I think Hogan's out, Codger, who both of those
missing him.
They were the difference this time last season when Norwich went there and got done 2-0. And there's one or two others. I think Jedinak, who's a key man for him in the midfield, he's been out. Apparently he has trained today, but I think that might be a push for him to come straight back into the 11. So compounded with a start that isn't anywhere near what most pundits and fans, I'm sure Villa fans, would have expected. No wins from three games, league games. I think they beat Colchester in the League Cup, didn't they? And we know that massive expectation there, that place, and that's what I put to Farke. If Norwich start the game well, even better if they go in front. We've seen it before there. That crowd can easily turn, and then as much as they've got experienced players, the Terrys of this world, that's a difficult place if you're a Villa player to try and stick your chest out and come through that. So I think this is a good time to be playing them, definitely. But having said that, Norwich will have to be very resolute, because there will inevitably be spells when they'll come under pressure. But if they're as resolute as they were against QPR, then you would think with the attacking options they've got, they will create chances.
I mean, we've got two issues here, haven't we? Gabby Agbonlahor is playing at the moment. No matter how his physical condition, he always seems to score against Norwich. And B, I think it's 1992 since Norwich won at Villa Park.
3-2, yeah.
And we've seen some shockers there, really, haven't we? And
can only remember when I think Wes got an equaliser. No, tell a lie. Wes Cross, Michael Turner, glancing header at the Trinity Road end, I think.
Yep.
And that was first game since Lambert's departure, Chris Hughton. Other than that, it's been a bit of a tale of woe. They've had some right tankings. I remember Ben Teke taking them to school a few times. So, and then last season, as I say, they couldn't handle Codger and Hogan. But if you're going to put an end to that, won't call it hoodoo, because it's hardly on the Fulham category, is it? But it's all there for them tomorrow. If Norwich are positive and on the front foot, then I think they can definitely get something there tomorrow. Fingers
crossed. I think that time they drew 1-1, they were also Villa were down to 10 men by that point. I think they played with 10 men for 45 minutes. Yeah. So we'll take that, obviously. Right, some of these questions, shall we get through some of these? Clive Moore, do we need some pace up front, or do we class Marley Watkins as a third striker? I mean, that's come up quite a bit. I mean, Marley and Josh, I think they see both as
that's
pacey
the way they
options.
see it. Yeah, they definitely see it. So it's effectively four striking options. You can debate all day long whether Josh Murphy and Marley Watkins are out and out strikers. You'd probably say they aren't, but in terms of, especially in the 3-5-2 formation, those two can definitely pair with a Jerome or an Oliveira. So
how do you think they'll play? How do you think they'll line up? Because I mean, I asked Daniel
tomorrow,
because they have seemingly looked more solid with four at the back.
I think they do.
They obviously want to he wants to play three at the back more and use pre-season as an example, however much you can read into that, of them looking solid, which they did, with three at the back.
I think, I'd agree. I think three, setting aside the nature of the goals against Sunderland, that they were so open down the flanks all day long, weren't they? And you just think in a four they look a bit more solid. I mean, Villa apparently were 4-4-1-1 against Reading, so if that was the case, you would think he would go with a four, just to match them up in a large part. But I'd like to think, you know, in the interests of trying to get a little bit of consistency. I mean, it did seem to work. And don't forget, I think Rangers went there midweek with a 3-5-2, and the four seemed to over the piece. I mean, Rangers were decent. I think they had more possession, didn't they, as well? So it might not have aided the possession game that he wants to play, but then you have to balance up. Like, do you want to be a bit more resolute defensively, a bit harder to play through? And they certainly looked that midweek, contrasted to Sunderland. So I think personally, I think he should go with the 4-1 for me, I think.
Cracking. We've got one more question, have we? What is the news on Closer? He is back in train. Well, he's not. Is he training with
no,
the
not
group?
Full training,
not
no, but next week, I reckon. Yeah. Is Millwall the last game before the international break?
It is, yeah, next Saturday.
He said there's an outside chance he could be in and about it for Millwall, but I can see a scenario where he's not quite ready, and then 2 weeks on, he's good to go.
Absolutely. And Josh Murphy, did you think he was off the pace on Wednesday? I thought his build-up was excellent. It was just the final product in a way. But
the last 25 minutes, he was a great outlet. Last 25 minutes, but as you say, end product wasn't there, and you probably say that's something he needs to work on. But in that regard, he was no different to Redmond, no different to his brother.
No.
Seems to be the DNA of a wide player.
Exactly. Let's not big Jacob up too much ahead of his brother, given we all saw what happened last season. Right, thank you for your question, Matthew. Thank you very much, Pad. We will be covering the Canaries tomorrow, of course, heading to Birmingham to follow all the action at Villa Park. So you can check us all out at PinkUn.com for all the analysis, live coverage, of course. And I think we'll be doing something live with the coaches when they leave in the morning.
Yeah, do we know what time?
I think it's between 9 and 9:30. So keep an eye out on all the feeds, and we'll be there, and we might speak to some coach people and all that sort of stuff as they head off to Birmingham. But for now, have a lovely rest of your Friday. We'll see you tomorrow for the big one.